Okay, we are recording now. Okay, and so as I said, this is going to be available on YouTube later today. So, and I'll send a link to everyone after it's uploaded. I want to welcome everybody. This is our sixth workshop entitled Mastering the Art of Emotional Intelligence. And here are some of our objectives for the next three sessions. We're going to learn about what emotional intelligence is. We're going to learn to define and practice things like self-awareness, self-management, self-regulation, self-motivation, and empathy. We're going to understand, use, and manage our emotions more effectively. We're going to learn how to better verbally communicate with others. We're going to identify the benefits of emotional intelligence and learn how to apply the skills in emotional intelligence to the workplace. Now, the manual I sent you has a total of 12 modules in it, and we're not going to be going through all 12 of the modules. We're actually going to be going through, I believe, about six of those 12 in the time that we have. And I'm gonna encourage you to go through the whole manual because there's a lot of good information in there, even if we don't cover uh, all of the modules in the workshops. And for today, what we're going to cover is module one, which is the course overview, and then we're going to go into module two, which is going to take most of the morning. As a matter of fact, I've got so much information in module two that we might not even get through all the way through module two. So if you're uncomfortable with my pace, just yell at me or something. I'm going to try to push through this so that we can get all the information in this morning. So one of the things that a lot of folks have bring into a workshop like this, emotional intelligence related, is, I'm not really sure what emotional intelligence is, and I'm not really sure what the benefits are. So I'm going to start out by talking about a benefit. An employee with high emotional intelligence can manage his or her own impulses, communicate with others effectively, manage change well, solve problems, and use humor to build rapport in tense situations. Emotional intelligence is a skill, and it's a part of your personality, part of your temperament. And it comes from essentially how you comprehend and understand yourself and others, and using that information to manage yourself and to manage your relationships. And one of the things that I did to get started was I sent you out some preliminary work to do. And this was the preliminary work. So I want to discuss that right now. I hope everybody was able to take a look at that and at least think about some of your responses here. So try to remember a recent work-related event that became emotional, and think of the body language involved as well as the verbal and nonverbal communications that occurred. So somebody relate to us, if you would, uh, a situation like this. Somebody tell us what your response was here. What was the work-related event?
Yeah, so I got one work-related event. I was
Okay.
former to or prior to this position, I was a school teacher,
Mhm.
and as we all know, fights can occur from time to time. So there's an opportunity for a fight, unfortunately, to well, that was about to occur. So what happened, and I'll just make a long story short, is that two of my students were going to go ahead and get ready to fight. I noticed the one was like clenching his fists and stuff. They got up and everything. I told one of those students go ahead and call the office immediately. And And I went ahead and intervened with both those students. The one student I knew I couldn't get through because he was clenching his fist, was not paying me no mind at all. The other student I could get to, I told him to look into my eyes and move all the way over to my desk and everything. And the other student listened. So really, and myself being cool, calm, and collected as I was and everything, and just really making sure that I handled the situation appropriately, um, really diffuse the situation, and when the fight did not occur. So no fight occurred and everything. And the one student that was clenching his fist went outside of my classroom and told him that, hey, you know what, I'm going to wait for you out here. And he was telling that to the student. So long story short, the administration came and stuff, but there was no fight that occurred because of me being proactive, me intervening and everything, and recognizing those things, and plus me recognizing who would listen to me at that time. So, yeah.
So that's really interesting. Is this something that you were trained for?
No,
Or
no. Well, no, this was not anything that I was trained for. As a teacher, you're not trained for this. This is just, you just
really?
have to like adapt to it. So,
So your goal was to try to diffuse the situation right there.
my goal was no fight occurring, which is
Hmm.
what happened. No fight occurred. No
Yeah.
punches were thrown. Just harsh words were said, and the student that was clenching his fist was really encouraging the other student to really throw a punch and everything. He was saying, "Hey, throw the first punch and everything," and I was talking to the student that was looking at me in my eyes and stuff, and
Hmm.
giving me eye contact, and I told him to just move away from him, go all the way over to the other side of the room, which he did listen to me and stuff. So I mean, I was right there. So I mean, there could have been a punch thrown, but I mean, I was right there to really go ahead and to, if things did escalate, to really stop anything else from happening if a punch was thrown. But luckily, nothing was thrown. No physical contact was involved.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Who else?
Sandy, this is Alan Sexton. My
Okay.
last employer, I worked for a defense contractor, and we were instituting some lean thinking programs and processes. And that can be a very emotionally trying times for individuals who have been with the company for a very long period of time. Typically, what you find is a response when you put forth a way to reduce scrap or a way to reduce time involved or cost is, well, we've always done it this way. Now you're
Mhm.
telling me we should do it a different way. I don't think you understand that we've been doing it successfully for so many years. Why are you asking me to change? Why are you trying to fix something
I
that's
muted
not broken? And sometimes it can be a
Thank
very,
you, Don.
very emotionally charged meeting. And it
Okay.
takes a lot of finesse to be able to convince people that the way that you've always been doing it may not necessarily be the way that you're going to be doing it in the future. So I thought I would relay that.
Oh, so how were you able to manage those?
Well, we had a lean manufacturing coordinator who really practiced good concepts of EI, and she could diffuse the emotionally charged meetings and issues by, either having people take a break, or the most important thing in the meetings was that everyone had the opportunity to state their opinion. It wasn't that someone was being told not to speak or not to interject their idea or their concept of lean manufacturing. And so 9 times out of 10, the it was diffused and the meeting went along because, whatever your opinion might be, it was still going to be something that was going to result in a cost benefit to the company and save time and save effort and things like that. So it was difficult to convince people at first, but eventually they came around.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Anyone else?
This is Terry Kearney with Swin, Sandy.
Okay.
At one of our job fairs, our in-person job fairs, you have to realize that all of the employers pay to have a booth.
Mm-hmm.
And so Alan and I, we walk around during the entire event and, try to accommodate the employers at the booths. So somebody came up to me and said, there's an employer here that didn't pay for a booth, and they're walking around talking to all the other employers, and they work for a staffing agency, and they're trying to promote their staffing agency. So somebody pointed the woman out to me. So I had to go up to her and address the fact that all of these other employers, like herself, had paid for their booth, and you can't crash our job fair, which she did, because she didn't pay to come, and all she did was, acted like she was a job seeker, but she was going around to the individual employers trying to sell her services. So basically, I had to, politely ask her to leave, and thank goodness she didn't fight me on that, or give me any resistance, and she did leave. And but also, I had to go back to the employers that had complained to me about her and just, explain to them what I did, because, they just felt that it wasn't right that somebody was able to crash their job fair. But when it's open to the public, anything can happen.
Mm-hmm. So was their main issue that this person was there and that they hadn't paid while everybody else had paid to be there?
Yes,
This person could have paid and had a booth there, but they opted not to.
correct. Hmm.
Uh, so it sounds like you were able to handle that without emotions getting out of control.
But it could have. What if they refused to leave?
Yeah, what would you have done if they would have refused to leave?
I don't know. I guess, if there was security around, you could call security or 911.
911.
I don't
That would have been
know.
an interesting 911 call. Yeah.
We could have always gotten their contact information and sent them an invoice.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's true.
You
Yes. Uh-huh.
could have done that.
Yeah,
Because they're actually participating in the meeting. They're just not in a booth.
Good
that's a
luck.
good idea.
Good luck collecting them.
Yeah.
There you go, Alan. That's a good one.
Yeah, we'd have to get a collection agency as mediator.
Okay.
But at least the point would be made.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Was there anyone else who had one they'd like to share?
I have
I've
one.
got,
Oh, no, you go ahead, Joe.
no, you go ahead, Joan. It's okay.
Let, okay, mine is really about, it was an event with a client, and it's me that felt like she lost control, of my emotions. But I'm not sure that I did. And it's rare that I have a huge emotional reaction in a client setting like that. So this was very unusual, and it really stuck in my mind, because to look at your questions here, was the reaction an appropriate response to the event? I don't know. So at what point do you kind of, so I was really struggling to find that balance between how I felt, how I responded, and what an appropriate response would be. Does that make sense, Sandy?
What was the situation?
So it was a client that basically wanted to institute a review process for Twitter, and I guess the issue was it surprised me, and they did this in a board meeting setting, and they hadn't talked to me about it, and so I kind of felt surprised.
They blindsided you.
They blindsided me, and I didn't realize we had a problem to fix, and any problems I had been fixing. So my emotional reaction was, inside I'm thinking, you don't even know how Twitter works. How can you have a review process for tweets where we're tweeting 22 times a day?
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of this. I felt like I was boiling. And after the fact, I had to ask another board member, did I come on too strong? And
What did you say when this person brought this up? What was your response?
I said, I don't appreciate being blindsided.
You
And then,
said this in the group?
yeah,
Oh, whoo. So what was the reaction there?
I probably shouldn't admit this in front of Bruce. Well, I was thinking about it this morning. This happened a few months ago. The issue has not come up again. So, well, that wasn't my first response was, "Oh, I didn't realize that we had a problem, and maybe we should talk about, ways to solve this problem as opposed to rolling out a policy um, for a problem that we hadn't really even discussed that existed yet." And then I said, I don't appreciate being blindsided by this. So yeah, I was very honest. And then afterward, I'm like, oh, did I do too much?
Okay. So this was a situation where you maybe thought if you kept your emotions in check and maybe dealt with this individual, one-on-one afterwards, it would have been a better response.
I guess I wondered. Yes, I was,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a one. It was actually a 3-on-3 people. So yeah, that was the question I was asking. So yes, that was the situation.
Yeah, I have to keep my emotions in check all the time. And sometimes I let my emotions get the better of me. Uh, and it's always to me a struggle to remind myself that my emotional reaction is a result of my own emotional biases.
Yeah.
So other people might not react the same way that I do. So I need to constantly remind myself, you're reacting this way because of who you are, and keep that in mind. And these type of insights really help manage yourselves here.
Well,
Really quickly. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. My takeaway from that was that I was too close to the work. Um, I was too, if I'm that emotionally involved and I have that reaction, then I'm not sufficiently distanced from the work so that I can really serve my client well.
I hear you. I One of the things that I'm going to relay later in the workshop is a story about just that, to where I find that I've become too emotionally involved in the situation, and that my emotions tend to run high when things aren't going the way I think they should be going. So, really quickly, what are some of the things that you would like to get out of this workshop? Uh, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? We have a chat function. Go ahead and put in the chat box there something that you'd like to get out of this workshop. Wow, nobody wants to get anything out of this workshop. Oh, my job's going to be easy.
Took me a while to find where the chat thing was.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, better understanding of how to coach employees. Okay, that's great. That's a very specific application. Uh, Improve your capacity to overcome all social circumstances, regardless if the conversation is gentle or hostile. Um, Learn how to utilize emotional intelligence in your present role. So this is you're going to like this because we're going to have some applications, lots of applications here. To be able to handle situations where you're not prepared. Um, to be concerned but not too involved. Sort of emotional detachment. How to keep my emotions under control if the other person is not here. This is going to be an unfortunate situation as we go through this, because these situations come about as part of an interaction between individuals, you're going to be thinking, well, I'm not the person who needs to be in this training. It's the other person who needs to be in this training. And if they're not in this training, what am I going to do about it? How can I effectively manage my emotions? So maybe we can talk about that. Um, what the term emotional intelligence really means. Okay, we're gonna hit that one pretty quickly here. To stay calm when someone else is not acting properly. To integrate the strategies to better serve my participants. Great. All right. Well, thank you. We're gonna get all of that and more out of this. So let me go ahead and move into, I believe this was Joe's um, question. What is emotional intelligence? So this is the original definition of emotional intelligence from Mayer and Salovey, who developed the concept of emotional intelligence originally. It's the ability to perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions so as to assist thought, to understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflectively regulate emotions so as to promote emotional and intellectual growth. Now, this is a mouthful, so I want to distill that into two areas: what it is and why we need it. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our own emotions and those of the people around you. So there's an internally focused part, which is understanding ourselves and managing ourselves. And then the external part is understanding others and managing your relationships. So that's why it's an effective tool. It's to better manage ourselves and to better manage our relationships. And this is one of the reasons why it's important. I'm going to be talking about Daniel Goleman here and here and there throughout this, because what we understand about emotional intelligence today is generally due to Daniel Goleman's work. He's the one who popularized the concept of emotional intelligence, and his theory serves as the backbone to what we're going to be doing today. And the link between emotional intelligence strengths in a leader and the organization's climate is very important. And he quotes um, this research uh, that determined that 50 to 70% of an employee's perception of a working climate is linked to the emotional intelligence characteristics of the leader. So we essentially, one of the things that Goleman found out in his research was successful leaders have strong emotional intelligence. There's more of a correlation between leader success and EI than there is between anything like talent or knowledge or intelligence, because there are intelligent leaders who have really good success. There are intelligent leaders who have terrible success. What it really comes down to is emotional intelligence. And we can talk about emotional intelligence in terms of these five distinguishing attributes: self-awareness, self-management, self-regulation, self-motivation, and empathy. And these generally are the five things that we talk about when we delve into emotional intelligence. So four of these things are more internally focused, talking about yourself, the first four. And then empathy is the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And this is more about taking all of this and using it to manage your relationships. So let's start by talking about self-awareness. I like to do self-awareness segment in any training that I'm involved in, because self-awareness is extremely important to career success in general. And there's a strong overlap between self-awareness and emotional intelligence. What is self-awareness? It's how you perceive your own strengths and your own blind spots, having a very clear understanding of who you are as a person, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what your blind spots are. It's the degree to which you understand your values and your responsibilities. And from this, to be confident in what you have to offer and work through your strengths to improve yourself. Self-awareness is probably the number one most important component of career success in general. Know yourself. Know yourself, and then use that knowledge to improve yourself. And on page 8 of our student manual, there's a list of personal characteristics. What I'd like you to do really quickly here is to put a circle around the 10 that most describe you, and then pick out a few of them that you think are the top characteristics that you display. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to go through this list. As I go through this list, it's easy for me to find a bottom 5.
I can't circle anything.
What's the matter?
You asked that we circle.
Yeah.
I can't. It's not doing it for me.
Do you
It's in your
feel like,
workbook.
oh, you didn't print your workbook?
Oh no, I have the workbook. I was just, you know what? I just clicked on your screen. I apologize.
Yeah, it's on page
And
8 of the
I couldn't.
workbook.
Yeah, I couldn't print my workbook, but I did upload it.
Okay.
I'm not working in the office.
Oh, okay. So what are some of the things that really jumped out for you here?
You want us to like list our ones that we starred?
Yeah, what are the ones that really jump out for you as things that that you exhibit the majority of the time?
Well,
Being
in my
resourceful.
opinion, I put confident, dependable, enthusiastic, independent, and organized.
Ah,
And I don't have a problem choosing either. Like some people are probably wavering. I always got an opinion on everything, right or wrong.
I chose, this is Alan, I chose broad-minded, dependable, trustworthy, honest, and flexible. Hopefully no one disagrees with that.
Well, I don't know, Alan.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
Might have to get a third party to mediate that situation, Sandy. I don't
Well,
know.
that's actually a good segue. Thank you. Do you believe that these are the things that others see in you as well?
Well, here's my list. Well, I'm at. honest, ambitious, competitive, determined, meticulous, teachable, sensible, trustworthy, understanding. I know that's way over 5, but that's my short list.
That's your short list?
Yes. So
My
also, just
answer
like what
is-
Alan said, well, I'm hoping that whether people see that in me as well.
Yeah, in answer to your question, are those are the things I checked off? What others see in me. My answer to that is it depends who you ask. And I was thinking of that because a lot of these things there's a lot of areas I had to make some changes in, and I would think, hopefully, that the changes have been for the good, and there wouldn't be a lot of argument as to no. But anyway, the 5 that I starred were broad-minded, cooperative, responsible, teachable, and understanding.
Okay. How easy was this to complete? How did these like jump out at you as things that you already understand about yourself?
Some.
Were there things that you were able to select that you really hadn't considered before?
Like, I think some of my self-awareness, I think some of my things that I would have picked maybe 20 years ago have changed completely now that I'm
Really?
older.
Really?
I used to be super ambitious, and I'm really not ambitious as at this point in life. I am, but not to the degree that I was when I was younger. So I did not select ambitious at all.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, this is Terry. I have a
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
If you threw out something about if you circle certain things about what you believe about yourself, but you don't think that other people view you as such, does that mean in life you go around like an actor or an actress?
I
What do you
didn't
mean?
say that. I
Well, I
didn't
know you
say
didn't
that.
say that, but I'm just asking.
I'm just, well, because we have, it's interesting. Have you ever done like a 360 assessment?
Hmm.
You know what those
Yes.
are? Okay,
Hmm.
so a lot of times when you do like a 360 assessment, you find out these things. You see what you have a concept of yourself. I mean, you can go through this list and pick out the characteristics that you feel apply to you. But then when you focus on what other people perceive in you, you might get um, a totally separate list of things. And a lot of that is because uh, a concept called intent versus impact. You have an intent that comes from you, that comes from who you are, but then there's an impact of who you are, and that is based on how others perceive you. So one interesting exercise would be to take this list and do it yourself and then give it to somebody that you know and say, could you circle the things that you see in me and then compare the two?
Okay, thanks.
Sure. This is one of the reasons that I use personality assessments a great deal because uh, a lot of characteristics that we have about ourselves come from our personality, come from our temperament, come from who we are as people. And a lot of times you have strengths that you haven't really considered as strengths. And so what I want to do right now is to jump into the personality assessment. Um, I because self-awareness is so important, I spend a whole lot of time on personality assessment because self-awareness uh, can be achieved completely through personality assessment. It gives you really deep insight and clarity into your strengths and blind spots, and it becomes a complete guide for your professional development. There are many, many, many personality assessments out there. I'm certified in about 5 or 6. I primarily use the Advanced Insights family of which the Disc Plus I've used here and we took. And so I'm going to focus on the sort of walking you through the Disc Plus so that you can understand what you're looking at when you read the report. Well, I'm going to start by talking about the DISC. And the DISC is a behavioral assessment. Behaviors are the things that other people see in you first. So the DISC assessment primarily focuses on how you behave, what others see in you. And the report itself, this is from page 2, the summary. And the summary essentially is on a scale between 0 and 100. And you have a set of bars. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 colored bars and 1, 2, 3, 4 gray bars. And the bars represent the four dimensions of DISC, of which I'm going to go over here in a minute. But the colored bars are essentially your natural set of behaviors, and the gray bars indicate how you can flex during situations where maybe you feel like you're being observed, maybe there's a crisis, maybe there's a high velocity situation. It shows how your behaviors tend to flex when you're out of your natural, normal situation. And the 4 components, the 4 dimensions of DISC are here. Decisive, interactive, stabilizing, and cautious. And this is from page 8 of your report. And I like to use this as a cheat sheet because it really gives you a good description of what the scores mean from 100 to 0. You can look to these words here and get a good idea of what your score means in terms of your behaviors. So the D is for decisive, and this is all about how you tend to approach problems and make decisions. If you have a higher D score, that means you are more of a quick decision maker. You're demanding, driving, forceful. You look at a problem as an obstacle that you really need to get out of your way fast. So you hit that problem, you make a quick decision, and you actually, it's actually an emotional driver for you. I'm angry, I'm frustrated that I have to deal with this problem. So why do I have to deal with this problem? This is just dispense with it. Get it out of the way right now. Whereas if you have a lower D score, you want to take the time to examine the problem. You're more agreeable and inquisitive and conservative. You want to assess the problem. You want to learn about the problem, collect facts about the problem, talk to people about the problem. And it's only after you've examined the problem that you feel comfortable going forward with a recommendation and a decision. The I stands for interactive. This is how you tend to interact with others and share opinions. This is the dimension of DISC that is closest to being extroverted versus introverted. So high I's tend to be gregarious and persuasive and inspiring, and they're the first people to talk during a meeting, and they like to maybe make small talk, and they're sociable. Lower I's are more introspective and reserved. They tend to process things internally. If you're in a meeting with a low I, you might not even know they're there because they're listening and they might not even say anything during the meeting unless prompted. The S is for stabilizing. This looks at actually 3 things. The first is pace, how you tend to pace things in your environment. High S's tend to be slower paced individuals. They're more patient, predictable, and passive. They like a much slower pace. They also tend to like to be in a team environment, working with a team that gets along. And so they also like harmony. So slow pace, team environment, and high harmony. The lower S's tend to be more spontaneous and chaotic. They like a faster pace environment. They tend to be more competitive, and they don't really need that team environment in order to be successful, in order to thrive. And then C is for cautious. This looks at how you deal with procedures, your preference for established procedures. High Cs tend to be more cautious and perfectionist and systematic. They like to have lots of procedures and plans and processes to work through. They tend to be very precise and very quality focused. The lower Cs, more independent, more careless, don't need processes, like a more dynamic environment. So it's the difference between maybe the accountant and the mountain climber. High C versus low C. So I want you to put this information to work, and I want you to refer to that cheat sheet on page 8. And this is a former client of mine who came to me for some coaching. And I want you to take a look at these results from their assessment and answer 2 questions. What can you tell me about their behaviors, using that cheat sheet? And what do you think they do for a living? One of the cool things about the DISC and the values is they tend to conform with careers really well. And I use them for career coaching. So some of you might have seen this before if you've ever been in one of my sessions. But based on what you see here, first, what can you tell me about their behaviors? What are their 2 main behaviors?
Oh, I'd
This
say
is
they're,
Terry. Go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say one thing that jumps out at me is that they're deliberate and think things through.
Mm-hmm. What are their 2 highest scores? What components are their 2 highest scores in?
S and C, they're patient and cautious.
Yeah,
Right.
stabilizing, cautious. Yeah, so that they take their
Right.
time.
Right. So they're more slow paced. What about, how do they feel about being on a team?
Not great.
Actually, it's the opposite. They're a team
that-
player.
I was
The
going to
high
say, I thought
S,
it was a team player.
yeah, the high S is the team related. Yeah, you can put in the chat. Some people have already done that. Patient and cautious, team player, quality driven. They're thinkers. They tend to be more precise. And how do you think that they feel about procedures? They like procedures, or do they disavow them altogether?
Think they love them.
Yeah.
This is a really procedural person. Now, you can't get higher than 99. So they got the highest S and the highest C scores you can get. And those 2 can tend to overshadow the other 2. Do you think that they're a fast decision maker or a more contemplative decision maker?
Contemplative.
Extremely contemplative. This person does not like to make snap decisions. So based on what you see here, what do you think they do for a living?
Maybe they own their own business.
Okay. What else? This is hard. This is
I
very
was going to say, they're
difficult.
just a teacher.
Teacher,
No,
got a
no,
lawyer,
definitely
got a researcher,
no, not a teacher.
therapist, an accountant.
And analyst.
Yeah, I do see a lot of accountants that have this type of profile, because the accuracy and the precision and the procedure and everything totally associated with being an accountant. This person came to me as and they have an MBA and they're an accounts payable manager. So that is accounting related. And the problem in the problem that they had when they came to me was not related to the C, it was related to the S, because they like to be on a team. They like to be on a team that gets along and works with one another really well. And he wasn't getting that. As a matter of fact, his management team was extremely divisive, and they didn't support one another, and they didn't trust one another, and he just couldn't stand his work climate based on that. So his solution was to essentially, excuse me, essentially find the same kind of role in another company, a company that had a more supportive management team, and he was able to do that. So yeah, you can see how the dimensions of your behavior tend to make you suitable for certain roles. If this person was in a role that had no structure, that had no plans and procedures, and made him rely on himself as opposed to a team, it would probably be a big stressor for him, because he wouldn't have the work climate that he needed in order to thrive. So I'm going to now jump out of this real quick, and we're going to do a walkthrough. And this is I'm going to hit the high points of your report here. Beyond the first 2 pages, which are the summary, when you get into the disc, this was on page 8. We've already seen this. This is the cheat sheet. On page 9 is something that I call the kite chart, because the results look like a kite. And when you use your disc assessment, it's really helpful to be able to look at all 4 of your behaviors at the same time and see, what is it about your 4 behaviors now that can help characterize you, characterize your response to the world. And what we see here is that high I's and high D's tend to be more extroverted, and high C's and high S's tend to be more introverted. So as you plot the 4 scores, you can see how your behaviors pull you towards being more extroverted or introverted. This individual had high S and high C, and so because of that, they tend to be more introverted. You can see extrovert, introverted, top and bottom. Now, if you look at right to left, it's task-oriented versus people-oriented. The high I's and high S's tend to be more people-oriented. High D's and high C's tend to be more task-oriented. So this individual actually has 1 foot in each, because their I and their S together tend to pull them to be more people-oriented, and their high C tend to pull them to be more task-oriented. But overall, you can see he's sort of leaning more towards a people orientation.
And Sandy, question, when
Sure.
you're talking about that, this is really your natural style, right?
Mm-hmm. This is your natural style. This is the style that you like to stay in 95% of the time. And then there is the next 4 pages are detailed descriptions of your individual behaviors and some of the things that come from that in the lower right-hand corners. And I'm not going to go over each of them. I hope that you guys go through this, and I'm going to recommend that you read these in great detail. What I want to focus on is down here on page, what is this, 18. These are strength-based insights for you that come out of combining all 4 of your behaviors. So there's a list of strengths that are associated with your behaviors. So for this person, builds good team relationships without being an extremist, can be charming and persuasive, friendly and argumentative, use humor, technically skilled and proficient. And what I recommend people do is go through these strength-based insights and highlight the ones that are especially important to you in your career and as a person. So this is on page 18. Then on page 19, your ideal job climate based on your behavior. This is what you look for in the organization that you work for. This person needs freedom to move around, projects needing you to motivate and persuade people, the ability to build a network of people, high quality standards. Believe it or not, job climate is one of the primary reasons why people don't like their work. It's not who they are or the type of job that they're doing. It's the climate that they're in. It's like swimming in toxic water. You want to swim in clean water, not toxic water. And uh, finding an organization to work for that has the right job climate for you, for your personality, is extremely important. Areas for continual improvement that could serve sort of as a set of ideas to lay out the things that you need to learn. This page on page 22 is unique. It's communication insights for others, not for you. This is something that you can give to other people. If you want to communicate effectively with me, here's what you can do. If you want to communicate with me, here's what you shouldn't do. And I like to, what my suggestion is, if an organization, everybody in like on a team takes the disc, I would take this page from everybody's profile, put them all together in a booklet, and hand them out to everyone on the team so that you can see exactly the best ways to communicate with everybody on your team and develop individual strategies for doing that. And then the relevance section at the back, which I've sort of duplicated as part of the homework that you're going to be doing. So let me jump back in now. Are there any questions about the disc? If we had time, normally I do this in like a 4-hour workshop, just looking at disc and values, 3 to 4 hours. So we only have time for just a brief sort of walkthrough, and we don't do a lot of activities here. But does anybody have any questions about the disc? When you took it, did anything surprise you?
Well, this is Joyce. So when I looked at the little canopy thing on page that was 9, I think.
Yeah.
I disagreed with that until I started reading some of the descriptions.
Oh,
and
okay.
then I
What was
started
it you
looking at
disagreed
descriptions.
with?
So I tend to be more of an extrovert.
Mhm.
But I'm definitely a people person, but introvert is like normally how I perceive myself, and others tell me I'm in an organization, I'm the first one to talk to people. I'm the
Mhm.
cheerleader. I try to get people involved and stuff. So I'm more the extrovert. But
Mhm.
I think, like someone had commented before, that's my natural. But at work, I'm different, because I have to be. And I think through the years I've seasoned maybe 2 or something. But when I start looking at the natural patterns and the other things, I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that really is me. So
Mhm.
I think that's an eye opener that someone else had commented that I've kind of changed through the years, because I did this, gosh, years ago. I used to work down at Sandy Cove 20 years ago, and I think we did this, and life has just changed for me, and I think my personality has changed along with it. So I think this
Mhm.
is really good to do this.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think that is interesting is things to avoid to effectively communicate with me.
Mhm.
And these are some of the things I say to my husband. Don't make promises you can't keep, or whatever. I'm like, oh,
How's that working for you?
yeah, I need to print this and take this home and say, hey, see, it's not just me saying it. The
Mhm.
experts say this about me. So that I think has been helpful.
Anyone else have any insights?
Yeah, this is Tondi. How's everybody this morning?
Good.
I took the disc probably about 7 years ago or 8 years ago when I first started working for Department of Labor, and I noticed a big change in Now I'm more procedurally oriented versus before I was working for private sector, not a government agency. And so I think my personality has changed also, where I'm following in more of a procedure area, where before I was more of a free thinker. I would act upon what the situation was without following procedure because there wasn't procedure where I worked before. So my background's paralegal, so I had to have the research and creative ways to do things. And now I'm more procedure oriented. So that was really interesting for me.
So the thing about behaviors is behaviors develop over time as a result of your life experiences. So I do of your like mental components, how you think, how you behave, and what motivates you. How you behave tends to be the most responsive to evolution. You can see changes in behavior occur over time more readily than how you think, for instance. And as you accumulate life experiences, your behaviors might change dramatically. Like if you, let's say that you have, you just get married and then you have a baby. Your behaviors definitely have to change and evolve pretty quickly to respond to the needs of now raising the baby, taking care of the baby. And, you might, a low C now might have to develop procedures and things and everything just to manage, having the kid. So you might find that your behaviors now start evolving.
Yeah.
Um,
It was interesting
any
though,
other?
because taking the disc a long time ago and taking it now, I just definitely see a difference.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Thank you.
I want to move to the values index. That's the second component of the DISC Plus. Your values are things that people don't necessarily see in you as readily as your behaviors. People see your behaviors first, but they don't see your values, which a lot of times are driving your behaviors. So the values answer the question, why? Why am I behaving the way that I do? There are 7 components to the values index, 7 dimensions. And just like on the disc, they're measured on a scale of 0 to 100 in this little grid arrangement here with these bars. But there's one difference, and you'll see that in each one of these bars, there's this gray box that has a line right in the middle that says norm. Norm is not the name of the box or the bar. Norm stands for average. And what this represents is the gray line represents the average score of everyone who has ever taken the assessment. So over time, this has sort of settled in this area here. And then the gray box around that norm indicates one standard deviation statistically above and below that norm. So what this gray box means is 68% of the people who have ever taken the assessment have scores that fall inside of this box. So what this allows us to do is to talk about values in terms of high and low. And these are the things that are more pertinent. These are the things that are, your high values tend to stand out. So your high values and your low values are the ones that fall outside of this box. So when we're talking about preferences, we don't talk about the scores that fall inside of the box. We talk about the scores that fall outside of the box. This very rare individual, has 6 scores that fall outside of that box. 4 high scores and 2 low scores. So let me talk about the 7 dimensions here. So the first dimension is the aesthetic value. This is the drive to achieve harmony and balance. So form, function, beauty. What are some careers you might associate with that? You can put it in the chat box or you can say it. What are some careers that you would associate with the aesthetic drive? Theater. Good. What else? Artist. Musician. Hairdresser. Think about visual presentation. Think about balance, visual balance. What are some careers that would require you to have a very strong passion for achieving like a visual balance? Architect. Good. Photographer. Graphic designer. Great. One of the things about, interior decorator. One of the things about the aesthetic dimension, people who have the high aesthetic tend to like to have a very well-defined work-life balance. So you work, you go into work, you work all day, you're done, you go home, and you don't think about work to the next day. Okay? This is opposed to people who have jobs where you're essentially thinking about the job 24/7, you know? So work balance is an extremely important thing for a high aesthetic. So if you had a high aesthetic working for you, what would be a way that you would reward them for like a bonus, a work related bonus? How could you reward them for doing a good job? Time off. Excellent. Give them more time off for themselves. The next is economic, which is the drive for money, practical results, return on investment. People with a high economic drive often tend to find themselves working in a financially related field. So what are some jobs that you would associate with that? Financial advisor. Good. Wall Street. Bookie. Bookie. Stockbroker. Banker. How would you reward somebody with a economic drive?
Money.
Money. Give them a bonus. Give them bonus. Golden parachute. Stock options. Yeah. Sandy has a strong economic drive. Individualistic, the third one, is the drive to essentially do things your own way, to be independent, to be unique, to have your own personal brand, your own way of doing things. What are some careers that you would associate with that? Author, entrepreneur. Good. If you wanted to kill the creativity and drive and passion of somebody with an individualistic drive, assign them to work for a micromanager. A micromanager will essentially rob the individualistically driven person of their will to live. The personal brand often becomes very important for the high individualistically driven person. Establishing yourself as the go-to person in what you do. You want to have that brand of somebody who, if you have a problem in this area, I want to be the person that you go to, that you know you can come to me because of my brand. Then political drive is similar to individualistic, but in a way it's very different. It's the drive to be in charge. So you want to be in control, you want to have power, you want to have influence. What are some careers you would associate with that? CFO, president, vice president, politics, good. Government. So oddly enough, one of the other types of career we see people go into with a political drive is not managing, leading and managing people, but managing things. So like a project manager or a program manager, they might not have people working for them, but they're managing something that's big and requires a lot of attention and management as well. How would you reward somebody with a political drive? Doing a great job as supervisor, promote them to district manager. The corner office, yeah, bigger corner. Public acknowledgement, give them that parking space. Yeah, hire their kids. Cute. Title, good. Yeah, executive vice president. I was just a normal vice president before, now I'm an executive vice president. Altruistic is the drive to help others. So if I have an altruistic drive, I want to help others. I want to put others' needs ahead of my own. I want to be of service to others. So what are some careers for that? Nurse, teacher, nonprofit, counselor, social worker. Good. One of the things that I often see with altruists is because that they put others' needs ahead of their own, they will often neglect their own needs. So keeping that balance between helping others, putting others' needs first, but also taking care of your own needs. It could be very stressing and emotionally draining to constantly be putting others' needs ahead of your own. So you really have to be aware of how that affects you and make sure that your own needs are taken care of. Regulatory is the drive to achieve structure, order, and routine. So I like to have lots of procedures. I like to know what's coming. I like to be in a daily routine with lots of structure. And if I don't have that, I will tend to create the structure. If there's no structure there, I will create my own structure and I will work within that structure. So give me a set of careers that you would associate with high regulatory. Who needs a lot of structure? Bookkeeper, work at the MVA. Oh, that's really procedural. What else? Administration, PCA worker, a census taker, good. Data entry. Yeah, anything where there is, repetitive work, a procedure that you follow, law enforcement, tax attorney, working within, a highly regulated environment. Then the last one is theoretical. This is the drive to learn, to acquire knowledge and understanding. Sometimes people with a high theoretical will learn for the sake of learning. So what would you associate that with? What sort of careers? Professor, clergy, researcher, scientist, a lawyer. Yeah, that's good. Some lawyers, definitely. Lawyer is such a broad term because lawyers specialize in all sorts of things. But yeah, you could see lawyers, some certain lawyers, professional student. Yeah, you learn for the sake of learning, so you're always acquiring a degree, new degrees. The thing about high theoreticals is they tend to be more analytical thinkers, and the higher, because of the drive for the learning for the sake of learning, it's often hard to get them to move from the analysis stage to the decision stage. So, paralysis by analysis. Sometimes you've got to move on to now stop analyzing and start solving. So, being aware of that in yourself it becomes very important. So what can you tell me about this person's motivators and what do you think they do for a living? What are their 3 highest drives? What are their 3 highest motivators? Yeah, economic, money. What else? Political and regulatory, right. So they want to be in charge, they want to make money, and they want to be in a structured environment. So what do you think they do for a living? Lobbyist, okay. Corporate, they run a bank. Good guesses. Keep going. Boss. Just so happens this person is he's in one of my networking groups, financial analyst. He's a financial manager in a large investment firm. He's a vice president. He also manages large client investment portfolios. So he's sort of dual-hatted. He's a vice president, so he manages people, but he also manages things. He manages these big investment portfolios. So economically driven, he's working with money. He wants to be in charge. He's managing the big portfolios. He's in a highly regulated environment, very structural. In that same networking group, I also have a real estate agent, an insurance salesperson, and a lawyer, and their set of motivators is identical to this. High economic, then political, then regulatory. And you can see the things that they might have in common. So let's do our walk through here. Unfortunately, the values index report is not as well developed or organized as the DISC report, in that it doesn't bring them together. It doesn't bring them all together. So you look at on page 30, you see the report. This person happens to have extremely high economic, just absurdly high economic, 99, woo. And then also they're high, you can't see it here, but they're also high altruist. This is extremely rare for high economic and high altruist. Why might that be?
Well, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
About, he's at a 53. Actually, all of my scores were like 49, 53, 52.
Mm-hmm.
And it's considered, it uses the word high.
Right.
But it's really just kind of medium. So,
well, it's high relative to the gray box. So altruist here, what this is telling you is the gray box is less than 53. So if your score falls outside that gray box, it's high. If it falls substantially, and I'm not sure what the cutoff is, if it falls substantially above the gray box, it's very high. So you see the economic here is very high because it's 99.
I see.
The altruist is 53, which is just over that gray box. So it's high.
I missed that. Thanks for that.
Okay. So why might it be rare for a high economic and high altruist together?
Whose motivations for making money are seem to be to give it away.
How many careers can you think of where you put others' needs ahead of your own? Where you're serving others, you put others' needs ahead of your own, you're taking care of others, and you're satisfying your economic drive at the same time. Surgeon, there you go. That's the medical field is the one area that I think that sort of stands out. You know, you would expect a doctor or a specialist like an ophthalmologist or a surgeon or a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon, something like that, to have high altruism, or they wouldn't be in the medical field to start with, you would hope. Although I have encountered some nurses who don't have high altruism, that creates some interesting stress situations. But also the high economic, the surgeons make a lot of money. So yeah. So it's very hard to find a career that satisfies both an economic and an altruistic drive. The next thing that you'll see on page 31 is this chart, which I have yet to figure out what the value of it is. I don't see what it tells you other than the same information you have here, except in a different graphical form. So you might like that. Then for each one of the dimensions, it gives you the same 5 categories of information: general traits, key strengths, motivational insights, training and learning insights, and continual improvement insights. So as you're talking about your strengths, this is the key thing to look at. So I would go through each one of these, especially the ones where you have a high or very high value, and read the strengths here and understand what those strengths mean for you. But it does that for all of the dimensions, and it never brings them together the way that the disc does, to look at them all together at the same time. And then at the end of this, it has the sort of the self-assessment, which is good information, and I've copped a little bit of that for your homework. So tell me this: we're now that you've seen, the values and everything, considering your values, did anything jump out at you when you looked at your results in your report? Did it pretty much look like you?
This is Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered it really did look like me, and I was really shocked because when they're asking all those questions and you're putting them in order, it was interesting that they could see me so clearly this way.
Oh, yeah?
I found it interesting.
Sometimes people have problems with what they're seeing. And a lot of that stems from the perception of what values are. Values are not what you do, it's why you do them. So, as an example, I was in that same networking group I was talking about earlier. We were discussing their results, and the real estate agent, who had high economic, high political, and high regulatory, looked at her results and said, "I don't understand this. I don't understand why I don't have high altruism." And I said, "Why?" She said, because I do a whole lot of volunteer work. I'm involved in all sorts of volunteer endeavors. And I said, okay, so that's what you do. Values index determines or suggests, why do you do them? So tell us, why are you doing volunteer work? Can anybody guess what she said? She's a real estate agent. What was her motivation?
Money.
Doing it to get clients.
Leads. She
She
wanted
was
leads.
doing it to
Yeah,
get
Belinda, she wanted
leads.
leads.
Clients, yeah.
Exactly. And she said it. She said she just paused for a second and then she said,
Yeah.
I do it to get leads. If she had a high altruism value, she would be doing it in order to help others. So you can get to the same end result through different paths. Okay? It's just that her motivation was different. So then she understood that about herself and the light went on. Oh, okay, fine. She didn't feel bad about it. And often figuring out a way to work through your values to achieve something related to a value where you might not have a strength becomes a really critical skill. So are there any questions then about the DISC and the values before we move on? The DISC and the values I put in here because they are an extremely good way of taking an inventory of the strengths that you might not know that you had to increase your self-awareness. Ultimately, that's the goal, increasing your awareness of your strengths and your blind spots. So I've got homework for you. This is something that would take too long to do today in the session. So I'm giving you this as homework. This is on page 11 and 12 of your manual. I want you to discuss your strengths and your blind spots. So what are your strengths? How do they enable your success? And what are your blind spots? How do they limit your success? And what we get out of this type of introspection is a more clear understanding of how our strengths enable our success. And get a more complete awareness of our strengths. And then understand what are some of the things that might be getting in the way. So you're giving an honest appraisal of yourself, strengths and blind spots. And you will know that you've achieved complete self-awareness when you're able to sort of be constantly aware, not only of your strengths and work within areas that put those strengths to great use all the time, but learning how to avoid blind spots. Because if you might have made a connection here. If you have to work in an area that requires a strength that is actually a blind spot for you, it can trigger an extreme emotional reaction. The more time that you have to spend in an area that is a blind spot for you, the more of an opportunity for a negative emotional reaction to occur. So this is where self-awareness becomes important. So I'm going to move on now to self-management. So you've achieved some degree of self-awareness. How do I use that to manage myself? So in order to effectively achieve your career objectives, you must use clearly defined methods to carry out those activities. So that includes setting goals, making decisions, planning, scheduling, and then evaluating your results. So in order to manage ourselves, we try to be true to ourselves. Work within those areas of strengths. Avoid those areas that are blind spots. Be consistent about it. Be accountable to yourself and to others. Once you've formulated this plan, you stick to the plan. Keep educating yourself and stay physically fit. Okay, so these are all components of managing yourself. So let's take a look at some self-management skills. We're going to discuss these rather than writing the definition. Somebody give me a good definition for reflection. What's a good definition for reflection? When you reflect on something, what are you doing?
Being able to
You're
assess
reviewing.
your strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, so you're reflecting upon your strengths. Yeah, you're analyzing, you're being introspective. So go ahead, say that again.
No, I was just going to say that you're reviewing, your performance, how you reacted, maybe potentially what you could have done differently or how you could have improved.
Mm-hmm. So give me a scenario where that skill might be important for you. Think about something at work or something in your personal life. Joyce says now. What do you mean? I think I know what you mean. You there, Joyce? Oh, as we are, that's exactly what I thought you meant. We just went through a self-awareness module where we were looking at the results of our disc and values. So now you reflect on what you see and you start to think about what this means to you. That's what the homework is designed to do. It's designed to help you reflect on, why your strengths are important. How do I use my strengths? And gain insight from that. Okay, good. Okay, self-awareness. What's a good definition for self-awareness? Hopefully we have one now that we just went through a segment on self-awareness. What are the two things that I've been harping on with relation to self-awareness? Two aspects of you. One of them is strengths. What's the other one? Joe says strengths and weaknesses, who you are as a person. Right. Here's a point of just a technical point related to the concept of a weakness. I try to avoid using the word weakness. And the reason I try to avoid using the word weakness is that weakness, there's a connotation that separates it from blind spot. If I have a blind spot and I've identified the blind spot, that is what it is. If I'm working in a situation where the blind spot never comes up, then it remains that. It's just a blind spot. But if I'm working in a situation that requires a skill that comes from that blind spot area, it could end up becoming a weakness. If I don't figure out how to manage myself, maybe for somebody with, say, low regulatory drive, time management might be an issue. And if I'm in a job that requires me to manage my time, unless I learn some really good time management skills in a way that doesn't stress me out, time management could be a real weakness for me.
Values would be another thing
Mm-hmm.
about self-awareness. You said strengths and values.
Right. So what's a scenario where having self-awareness could be important?
You're being attacked or challenged.
You're being challenged. Okay. What else? Here's one. picking a career. When I was in high school, believe it or not, I lacked self-awareness. And all I knew was I was good at math and science. So everybody said, become an engineer. If I would have been self-aware and understood my strengths and my blind spots, I probably would not have chosen that career. I probably would have chosen something else that put my analytical skills to work differently, because there were a lot of things about engineering that wasn't satisfying my values. So I probably could have picked a better career, given that I'm not doing engineering right now. So
You're engineering our brains.
yeah, kind of. But I'm not doing circuit analysis.
No.
Okay, what about planning? What's define planning? What's a good short definition for planning? Okay, organization, that's a component of planning. Laying out schedules, timelines. I think about planning as sort of the roadmap that gets you from where you are now to where you want to be. It's sort of the implementation arm of strategy. My strategy says, here are my goals, and here's where I am now. My plan lays out how am I going to get there. Okay, so how could planning be important? Give me a scenario where planning can be important.
When there's maybe one specific effort that needs to take place, but there's multiple members of the team that needs to implement it. So there needs to be a planning process in place. So the variety of different members know what their responsibilities are. So everyone can then come back to the collective group and accomplish the goal.
So everybody knows what their role is, and everybody knows that they're working towards a common goal. And they understand what their role is in achieving that goal. You know what that creates as a spinoff is mutual accountability. That's something that often creates emotional issues, is the idea of being accountable to one another for the success of something like that. Okay, what about monitoring? What's a good definition of monitoring? Reviewing progress. Why is that important? Why is it keeping an eye on things? Why is this important?
Making sure that everyone still understands the one common goal aspect and making sure that everyone is still moving in that direction, because oftentimes people get deterred for a variety of reasons.
What about as it relates to the ultimate results?
Just maintaining the focus, or just making sure that that still is the ultimate goal.
Okay.
So I think sometimes when we do things, unintentional things create or organically pop up, and then sometimes it redirects the focus and the intent of the overall group. Because when we get hypervigilant over one component versus the overall picture.
Yeah, Joyce says monitoring is measurable. Right. Monitoring implies some sort of measurement. You have to measure progress against maybe a benchmark or against a target that you're trying to achieve. What about time management? What's a good definition for time management? Eat the frog first. Self-care, working effectively. Time management means different things to different people. What gets measured gets done. Getting you need to accomplish done. How many of you start the day with a to-do list? Yeah, Joan does. I knew that. Okay. I hate to-do lists. Sometimes I have to do them. I do not start each day with a to-do list. To me, time management is what is the most important thing that I need to accomplish today, and I focus on that. And to me, that, but it's definitely not a very uh, precise way of managing time because I also chase shiny objects. Um, so, what's a scenario where you using that skill would be important?
When you have a deadline?
Mm-hmm. Working towards a deadline. Yeah, Joy struggles with it. So do I. I get motivated by the deadline. The closer the deadline comes, the more motivated I am to apply energy to it. An assembly worker, yes. Uh, you know, somebody else who's an assembly worker would definitely need to be able to manage their time. What's flexibility? I want to talk about this one. Give me a definition for flexibility. Resiliency. Prepare for the unexpected. Able to roll with the punches. When things change. Juggler, open-minded. Bend but not break. Ah, it's very zen. So what's a good scenario where you might need to be flexible to use that skill? Alan was talking about one at the very beginning. Hi, Joan. Thanks for clipping in. What would be a scenario where flexibility every day as a housing counselor? You want to elaborate on that, Joyce?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest frustrations, and you guys probably all see this over at the workforce center, is you plan a meeting with someone virtually and they don't show up, or and you've got other people you're trying to merge in, and it just gets really frustrating. So you just got to regroup, not let it affect you, and just go, okay, what what do I do with that? For me, it's difficult some days because I work evening hours to accommodate the schedule of my clients, and uh, I just I'm still adjusting to that since the virtual world, honestly. But it's just people just don't RSVP, they don't show up, all that type of stuff. So which makes me have to be flexible.
Yeah, being able to respond to something dynamic. I once coached somebody who worked at Anna's house up in Bel Air, and she was a caseworker, and she had very high regulatory, and there was she experienced the stuff that you're talking about on a daily basis, but she didn't want it to be that way. She wanted to be able to establish a routine with her clients, and she could never do that. So she was stressed out all the time. And then self-appraisal. What's a good definition of self-appraisal? Knowing your worth. self-evaluation. You get to the end of a project or the end, you've achieved a goal, and you look back. You can look back and say, okay, what went well? What didn't go well? What can we do about that? How can we learn from that? Being honest about yourself, post critique, right? What's a good scenario where that skill would be important? Grant writing, right? Did you succeed getting the grant? Did you not get the grant? Why did you not get the grant? Boss, right? Teacher. Self-appraisal, some of these sort of work together, like monitoring and self-appraisal. Monitoring, how are things going? Self-appraisal, when we get to the end, did the things that we say were going to work? Did they not work? Did they not result or provide the results that we thought they were going to? If they didn't, what do we do about that? Okay. There are things about your personality that may make these things easier or more natural, or harder or less natural. For instance, time management. Who do you think would have a better sort of natural time management ability? High C or low C? High C. Who do you think would tend to be more flexible? High C or low C? Low C. Okay. So you can see that your personality attributes could enable you to do these easier, or could get in the way of you doing these things more easily. This is something that I added because I think this is very important. If you know what type of events trigger negative emotional responses, you can learn to avoid them. So I call this avoiding potential train wrecks. And I think this is a very important aspect of self-management. Do you have, first of all, name some situations that you know will trigger a negative emotional response in you? If you want to write these down in your manual, that's fine, but you can put them in the chat. You can talk about them. Criticism. Why does that why does that evoke a negative emotional response, Joe?
Depending on how the criticism is leveled, like some people can give you constructive criticism, and other people like to give criticism and chew you out in the process. So, especially, if you think you're doing something right and somebody's, there's ways of telling somebody, well, you didn't do that exactly the way we wanted to, but you could also like lay into them and, or when you tell them, like to do something, and then the person does it, and then the other person comes back and like lays into them because of what they did. But the thing is that the person was told to do something in the first place, so they're following the instructions, and then you find out, the other person, you may have struck a nerve that you're not aware of.
So there's a couple of other ones here that came in the chat box. So Sheila says, I get stressed if I have a deadline. And the response to that is you manage your time. So I know that if I'm working towards a deadline and I'm get behind and I'm approaching that deadline, it will trigger a negative emotional response in me. So knowing that, how do I avoid that? You manage your time. You
Manage your
use
time
time
better.
management, that time management tool to avoid that so that you don't have that a negative emotional
Right.
response.
Don't put things off.
Ellen says, when I didn't even know something was wrong and it wasn't addressed months ago. Give me an example of that, Ellen.
Well, this is pre-pandemic, but
Okay.
I had a supervisor take me into their office and basically tell me that and hand me several folders that were months old and telling me I needed to fix some things. And it's already ingrained, like I'd already created a process, but why didn't they address it when it first was brought to their attention?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you were going along doing this process and you got no feedback.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, months later, you get feedback that sort of made you feel like you should have been doing things differently all along.
And why didn't you address it
Okay.
when it happened?
So what can you do to avoid that in the future?
That I don't know.
Okay.
But I get upset.
Right. So does
And I
anybody have like a suggestion on how they would deal with that sort of thing? So here's one way that I can think of. This is largely a component of your relationship with your supervisor. Essentially, if you know that your supervisor is reluctant to address things in a timely manner, you can essentially manage them. You can say at the very beginning, okay, here's the procedure that I've laid out, get feedback on that, and then set up some regular meetings with them to, check progress. So you're sort of forcing an exchange of information now to where you're giving them the opportunity to weigh in. And it's more likely that they will weigh in earlier than if you just sort of let it go. But it has to do the effectiveness of that approach has to do with how well you know your manager. A lot of times you won't figure these things out until, too late. Like you say, hey, my manager let this go for a long time. Now you know something about your supervisor that you didn't know before. And now you can start. I've had to manage my supervisors in different ways many times over the years. Different, when I find out, hey, here's something about their style that doesn't go well with me. I have to manage them. So I will do things like that. And in your case, what I would say is, you know, establish those lines of communication early and have like a regular, like maybe once every 2 weeks or something like that, sort of a monitoring check to make sure things are going, according to their expectation. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know sometimes you don't want to manage your supervisor, but sometimes it's necessary.
In Girl Scouts, we've been calling it adulting, but I didn't think about applying it in this way at first.
Yeah, this can be a really potent skill. Just, understanding what the train wrecks are the big train wrecks that can cause an emotional response in you. And then figuring out how I can avoid them. A lot of times, it's just like, hey, this person and I don't see eye to eye, and we're always arguing and always disagreeing and always fighting. You have two choices. You can either start to establish some sort of reconciliation pathway, understand things about yourself to reduce those, or you can avoid one another. I mean, either way, it gets to that, solution. I prefer the first way. As a matter of fact, if you're having a poor relationship with one of your coworkers, one of the best ways to deal with that is to have them take the disc plus, and then you exchange your results. You basically go over your results and see where what is it about you that's causing these conflicts? What is it about your different personalities that are causing these conflicts? And that's a really good way to mitigate these things. I'll get into that a little more later.
Thank you.
So let's look at an example of that. Let's take these two people. Based on the way that, they're different discs, what are some potential train wrecks that could occur in their relationship? First of all, do they have anything in common behaviorally? Do you see anything they have in common? Is there anything that's even close?
Not really.
There is nothing. These people have no behaviors in common. So what do you see as some potential train wrecks here?
One would want to move out cautiously in doing things, and the other would be about upset because they're moving too slow.
Mm-hmm. What are some other things that you would see? Look at their C scores.
Could be some potential like confrontations or verbal arguments and disagreements.
What happens when you have one person who likes procedures and one person who doesn't need procedures?
There's going to be a
Well, that could be
clash.
very frustrating for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because one person is going to want to see everything, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, everything done step by step by step. And the other person is probably going to get to the same place, but they're going to do it their way. And person number one is going to think that they're wasting time, even though they may get to the desired endpoint.
Now, I do see something that is hopeful here. And is that's in their S scores. The high S score there from the second person, I know that they want to have a harmonious relationship because that's part of the S. This person, their score is lower, but it's still above the 50. So I think this person probably would prefer to have a harmonious relationship too. If their scores were down in the 20s, they might be perfectly accepting of having a competitive, conflict-ridden relationship. So having the desire to have a good relationship is very important. Once you get past that, then it becomes a matter of figuring out how can we coexist when one of us is very procedural and one of us is very dynamic. One of us is very gregarious and one is more introspective. One is a fast decision maker and one is a contemplative decision maker. You have to learn how to manage that. How can we figure this out? So this is understanding what the problems are and what the differences are is the first step. Then you have to develop effective means now to move forward together. But if you understand one another, you have eliminated a whole lot of those initial barriers. So if I know that at least one person said, there is somebody in my organization that causes me to have negative emotional reactions. This is one good way to cure that. So if you've got somebody in your organization who you say, I know they need to take this, just send them that link, let them take it, and then compare your results. Now we're going to move on to self-regulation, and it's getting, okay, we got about 15 minutes or so left. I'm not sure if we're going to get through. Oh, can I explain the gray again? I'm sorry. The gray is where you flex, where you can flex in a high velocity situation. Let's say that I prefer to be, let's say this person here prefers to be very dynamic without a lot of structure. Let's say that though there's a situation that causes them to have to be more structural. They can flex in this direction temporarily. They can also be more contemplative temporarily. They can flex down in their D in a situation, as long as they don't have to stay there for that long. So the gray is where can you flex given that you're not going to be staying there that long, because you're going to want to go back to your preference eventually. The longer you have to be in the area outside of your preference, the more of a stressor it is for you. All right, now self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to control your emotions, desires, and behaviors in order to reach a positive outcome. It's a response to different type of pressure. There are good pressures, there are bad pressures, and then there's no pressures. Good pressure is pressure that energizes you. It's pressure that gets you motivated and excited and, pushes you towards the outcome. Bad pressure is something that it evokes a negative reaction in you. So let's take a look at the activity on page 17, which is express yourself. And given our time, let's focus on one of these. I'm going to pick out one. Number 2, I like this one. Number 2. Put in the chat box what your feedback is, your honest, your first response. Boom. You find out that several of your coworkers are talking about you behind your back to the boss. They're telling your boss that you are slacking on the job, and the quality of your work is poor. What do you do? What is your reaction? Boom. Be honest. Prove them wrong by your job performance. Let's talk about it. Meet with the boss individually. Yeah, you're trying to get ahead of it. What else? Assess what they are saying and see how accurate you think they are. It could be a blind spot. That is a very interesting response. My initial response would probably be anger. Any others? I'm going to encourage you guys for these things that are in your workbook that we're doing verbally to go ahead and write on your own, go through them and write out your responses, because we're not going to hit all of them. Yeah, Ellen would get angry and then look to see if they're being honest. then go talk to your boss and coworkers. I learned early on the best way to do this is to confront, and that may be just me, my personality, but if I find that somebody is talking about me behind my back to the boss, I would probably first go to the coworker and I would say, what's going on? Why are you doing this? And then I would also go to the boss. But I would definitely you know, get with the coworker and say, hey, look, I know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? And see what's going on. Now, self-motivation. Here's a quote from Andrew Carnegie. Better people who are unable to motivate themselves must be content with mediocrity, no matter how impressive their other talents. So self-motivation is essentially, you know, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What am I working towards? What is it that drives me through the day? So self-motivation involves working towards a cause. It involves not comparing yourself to others. It involves making a conscious effort not to give up. Don't dwell in the past and think positively. And since we use our values index, self-motivation through values becomes a very effective means of understanding how we are motivated. Take a look at this individual here. What are they motivated by? What's their top three? What's their top three values?
I guess individualistic, altruistic, and theoretical.
Right. So when they get up in the morning, what do they want to do?
They want to do their own thing.
Right.
They want to do their own thing. They want to do they want to do it their own way, really.
Right. Do it. They want to help others, but do it their own way.
Right. And what else? How do they work that theoretical in there?
Before they make a move, they think it through and say, what's in it for me and others?
Yeah. Let's take a look. Like if you're a caseworker, your theoretical might be satisfied just by learning about your client. Learning all the things, learning about the problems that they're facing, exploring the problems with the client, that could be how your theoretical manifests itself. But they also have a low regulatory. So what happens if they're in an environment that has a lot of structure in it? Is that going to help their motivation or is that going to hurt their motivation?
Probably tend to hurt it.
Yeah. So they're going to have to figure out a way to stay self-motivated, even though they might, not be able to exercise all of their high values all the time. And they might even have to address some of their low values. So coming up with a motivational strategy through your values becomes a very important tool. So here's a case history that puts this in perspective. A colleague of mine was coaching a salesperson in South Africa. The salesperson was not meeting their sales quota. And one of the reasons that they weren't making their sales quota is because they were very high altruist and very low economic. For a salesperson, a traditional salesperson, to be successful, we generally look for high economic, high individualistic, and high political. Those are the ingredients for being an effective salesperson, especially if this person works on commission. The more sales they make, the more money they get. This person was on commission. but they had high altruism and low economic. So the whole concept of making money through commission and making, increasing sales to make money was alien to them. It turns out that what they were selling, though, gave sort of a clue as to how to motivate this person. They were selling heart defibrillators. And what does a heart defibrillator do?
Jolts people back.
It jolts people
Recharges
back.
your heart.
Right. So what if they don't have the heart defibrillator? What's going to happen?
They'll die.
They
Yeah,
die. So when you sell a heart defibrillator, what are you doing? What's the end result of your sale?
Saving lives and being altruistic.
Saving lives. Once this person started to think about a sale, because he saw that the data, the statistics indicated every unit he sold, statistically speaking, saved 2 lives. Once he saw that he was saving lives, it enabled him to reframe his purpose for being a salesperson. So every unit he sold saved 2 lives. And once he understood that, his sales skyrocketed. But it wasn't because he was making more money for himself or the company. It was because he was saving more lives. So often when you are working, having to work in an area of a low value, a low motivator, you have to figure out a way to leverage your high motivators in order to do it. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you really need to have a coach in there helping you figure these things out. Just like the real estate agent doing volunteer work in order to make sales. They were doing something altruistic, but through their economic motivator. So how easy is it for you to stay motivated if you're working through one of your top 2 or 3 motivators? How easy is it for you to get up and, if taking a look at your top 2 or 3, how easy is it for you to get up, get out of bed, and be just charged and passionate about what you're doing if you're always working in those top 2 or 3 values?
Very easy.
Should be
Very
fairly easy, yeah.
Yeah. How hard is it for you to stay motivated if you're working through one of your bottom 2 or 3?
Probably fairly difficult.
Yeah. So how can you use the insights from your values index in order to stay motivated?
Try and frame things into those things that you have a high score in values index
Mm-hmm.
for motivators.
Yeah.
You
If
know,
you're able to use your high values, 80% of the time over the course of the day, it's a lot easier to stay motivated. It's a whole lot easier to stay motivated. And then through those strengths to come up with strategies when you need to be more regulatory, when you need to be more, in charge of things, coming up with a way of leveraging your high values to achieve those. That's the key, I believe, to staying motivated, to self-motivation. Do you feel right now that you're working within your values to the degree that you can stay self-motivated? How many of you don't? How many of you don't feel that way? That you're working within your values to the degree that you can stay so, okay, Ellen, you're not. What isn't being satisfied in your values?
I'm very, one of my hobbies is theater, and
Yeah.
that is where I derive a lot of drive in. But my work does not have anything to do with harmony, balance. It doesn't have anything to do with any of that.
So are you saying that you're having to sort of be on call 24/7? Or are you saying that there's no aesthetic
There's
uh,
no aesthetic
com-
job.
there's no aesthetic component to what you do?
No, yeah, there is not.
What about your other high motivators?
Theoretical.
Mhm.
So
Are you able to use that?
no.
Really?
Well, you can if you read law. I mean, I do get into reading the law part of my job, but I don't always get the time to do that
Mhm.
because of what they want you to. It's more of an it's like a data entry job.
Yeah.
So there's no, you don't really always get the time to read the law and understand that learning process because it's, yeah, I'm probably, I don't know.
Mhm. I'll tell you what, Ellen, if you'd like, say on Monday, if you've got time. Well, I can't do it on Monday. I have a funeral. If you'd like, maybe even later today, if you've got time, I'll be happy to go over your results with you one-on-one,
Okay.
and we
I
can maybe,
appreciate it.
yeah. Anybody who wants to go over the results with me one-on-one, just let me know, and we can set up a time to do that. I think we are at a stopping point for the day. This is the last piece of session one, but we can do that on Tuesday. So I'm going to get out of this right now and say, are there any questions about what we've covered today? Any questions? So I was either very effective or you're very bored. Okay, so given that, oh, thank you, Joe. The next class is Tuesday morning at 9:30. I will send a link to that to everyone. Thank you, Tondi. There is a lot to think about. We covered a whole lot of information today. And this, again, is your homework. Do that, and we'll go over this first thing Tuesday morning. And again, if anybody wants me to go over their assessment one-on-one with them, I can do that over the course of the next week. Monday is going to be slammed for me because I have a family funeral that begins in the morning. It's going to last all day long. But aside from that, I should be able to work with you.